Okay, let's finish up. Okay, so tonight has been all about learning about how to build web applications. And so we've seen all these pieces parts because it's, like I said, way more complex. You've got two programs running. You've got one which is your web server, that is this web container that runs this thing called Jetty that contains the servlet thing that you write. So that's your code, and that's your back-end logic for your application. And then we saw what happens on, and that thing, yes, you can unit test it, but because it interacts with the servlet API, you need to trick it into thinking that it's actually running in the web container, and you use mock objects to test that. And while it's cool, it's also kind of mind-blowing. Then we saw what happens on the client side, on the Java client side. We saw what happened in the browser too. We can hit the URLs in the browser, but we can also hit the URLs from the client. And we saw there was this command line program, and the command line program does the parsing, and that's pretty easy. But the heavy lifting is done by this REST-build client thing, and this is what interacts with the URLs, right? And so it's the thing that actually, at the end of the day, makes the HTTP servlet request that goes off of the server and then handles the that comes back in the response. So it does all of that. Now there is logic here, right? There is code inside the phone bill REST client, and it would be nice to be able to test that. However, this is pretty heavily tied to things like calling the URL, and so if your server isn't running, nothing's going to happen, right? So if I try to run my project 1 and the server is running, project 4 is going to call this REST this REST client, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to stop my server right here, and if I go and I run my client, it blows up with a connection exception because the connection was refused. Oops. Well, I want to be able, so that's what happens when the server isn't running, but I want to be able to test this code. So that means in order to test this code, the server has to be running. That's more complex than a unit test. That's an integration test. So what I want is I want an environment that, what I want to be able to do is run my tests in an environment in which which Jetty is running. So I could, I could start up Jetty and then, there in my IDE, run a bunch of tests that test against that Jetty, and that works, but it's not something that's terribly reproducible. What I really want to be able to do, and this is something that Maven gives you, is to be able to have this whole build test process that goes and builds my application and starts up Jetty and deploys my application to it and then runs a whole bunch of tests against that Jetty that lets me interact with classes like my Project 4 and like my phone bill REST client. And you can do that, and I'm going to show you how. So, off in the integration tests part, the IT directory, we have a handful of integration tests that actually do things with a running Jetty. And let's start here with the phone bill REST client. So I have here in this class, this test class, I have a series of tests that perform operations on a running Jetty. And actually right now, I don't have my Jetty running, so if I try to run all these guys, it should fail spectacularly. Red all over the place, because they all have connection refused. Okay, I'm going to start up my Jetty. Yeah, it's complaining about something. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, sorry, that was me doing an export in the background. Okay, my Jetty is running. Now I'm going to run my tests again. Ooh, and everybody's happy. So let's see what we've got here. Now this is the phone bill REST client. So this is nice because this is like a Java interface, and so you can do things like deal with maps. It's not like the command line interface where like all you can deal with is what's ever provided to the command line arguments and then what's ever written to standard output and standard error. So look at my test 0 here. My test 0, the first test that I run, I just create a new client, and here I configure the host and the port for the client. I create a new one of those, and then I call remove all dictionary entries. And so now we can debug this guy. Well, first we'll run it all by itself. Great. And now we'll debug it. Oops, I didn't set a breakpoint. That was dumb. I'll debug it again. Okay. This will give me my new phone bill REST client, and it's a real thing. And now I can dive into here. And oh yeah, sorry. The first thing that it where's the breakpoint? Oh, sorry. This is actually a little bit of setup code that removes all the entries in the dictionary. So what this does, actually, I'll show you real quick. I'll attach over here to my Jetty server, and I'm going to set a breakpoint in the do delete. There is one method inside the servlet that I didn't tell you about, and that's the delete method. So there's a HTTP verb which is called delete, which is meant to delete data. This isn't something that's part of your assignment, but you need it. Oh, I needed it for the integration tests. Why do you think I needed it for the integration tests? Exactly. Right. So this is something interesting. So the first time I wrote this stuff, I wrote all these tests. I was so proud of myself, and I ran it a second time, and it's like, everything failed because everything existed already. So this is an important thing that you need to do. You need to start with a clean environment, or you need to clean up your existing environment, then run all of your tests. So very good. And basically what this does is it calls dictionary.clear. So this clears out. This clears out all of the in-memory data. Yeah.
Something that I noticed today in a lot of the code we've seen up to this point,
Mm-hmm.
we omitted the this keyword, and this code's had a lot of this references.
Oh, has
I
it?
know that's a old,
Yeah.
it's a Java convention.
And it's also an old Dave convention. Yeah.
So is that something we should be including all the time, or not including?
Oh, yeah. This is an old habit of mine. And it's an old habit of mine that comes from my days of writing Emacs without syntax highlighting. That's what it is. So back in the day when everything was the same color, if I wanted to distinguish what was a field that I was referencing versus a variable that I was referencing, I would prefix it with this. And that way it's absolutely clear using the Java programming language that I am referencing a field right here. And, and that was fine. But now we have syntax highlighting, we have easy navigation, so I could just as easily say this, and everybody knows what this means because it's purple. And I can highlight it over it and say, oh yeah, right, this is a private final map, and it's in the phone bill servlet, and so then obviously it's a field. So yes, so this is not necessary. It's a holdover.
I guess the question is, I know that's a convention. Is it no longer in practice nowadays when people write Java code?
Yeah, I haven't seen it here again. Ever since people started using IDEs to write, real IDEs, Java, people don't use it anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's used in C# too, but it's more of a preference because I like it to know that this is a property or a method of this class, as opposed to when you have classes that are interact.
Yep.
Sometimes it's annoying when you have some line that has this property equals this method. Every parameter has this. It can be annoying, but it's nice for clarity.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the aesthetic. It's a call. It's a judgment call. Yeah.
Carla said that's how she could tell if a C programmer was writing Java or if it was written by someone who normally writes Java. I mean, that's one of the things she said.
It's a tell. Like those of you who are used to Python, I've seen some of the code that has instead of camel cases, all these underbars underneath it. It's like, what does that even look like? It's like, oh yeah. Instead of saying it was do delete, it would be do underbar delete. That's a Python thing, I guess. Anyway, it's fine. We all speak different languages, but we're all the same on the inside. Lonely. Anyway, right. Sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, there's this do delete method, which is not what I wanted to show you guys. So sorry. Oops.
Where are you calling it? Are you calling it a setup or teardown?
It's the first test. So I don't want to do it before every test. I just want to do it before the test suite is run. So maybe there's a better way to do that. I'm not. Yeah, there's a before all. So yeah, I could totally do. Oops. I could do before all. Oops. What the hell did I just do? I could do before all. The nice thing about this, I can run this right here. Before all, I can't run just that. So this allows me to actually sort of clear it in real time. But I just made that up. That I could do that. I don't think it was intentional in the least. So yeah, don't be that impressed. We'll try this one instead. Yeah. So here, actually, where's my debug point? There's on do delete. Come on. Oops. Do post. Do get. Okay, cool. So now if I attach, sorry, what debug sessions do I have? I have Jetty server and I have this. I'll go back here. Okay, so I'll run this guy to the end. There I am in my do delete, and like I said, that just clears the dictionary and then says so. Now if I go back here, oops, now if I go back here, actually I don't know if there's more that I really want to show you guys, other than the fact that now, I can debug my unit test, my integration test. And here again, this is an integration test because it relies on what's there in the server. Yeah.
So is that why you have this @fix method?
Yes. Okay. Good.
Convention to make sure the tests are running in a certain order.
Exactly. So, yeah, the more astute student may notice that I have this fixed method order annotation here. This is a JUnit annotation that basically says, hey, listen, but by default, the order in which the methods are run in JUnit is not specified because Java Reflection doesn't specify the order in which the methods are returned. It's just the way it works. However, there are some times when you want to, when you have to run methods in a certain order, and this is this one. That's not the best thing to do. You really want your tests to be idempotent. You want them to be independent of each other. But, in this case, I decided, well, I really want to have like bang, 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 bang. So the first test is like clearing everything up. The second test is like, okay, make sure that when you've got an empty server, there are no entries in it. And then it's like, okay, define one word. There is no test 3. Okay. And then the last one is, really? I should have one for like get a definition, right? I should. Oh no, I probably had a test 3, and I decided to combine these two because there's really nothing that interesting about a test that just does getting one word. And then here is a test that actually validates that when you have missing parameters, that you get the error condition that you expect. And so I had to expose this post to my URL method in order to do that. So what this demonstrates is that yes, you can write tests that are that exercise the servlet as it's running in a web container. And that's important to be able to do because it demonstrates that, yes, when run in like a production-like environment, your code is going to work. So this is good for running in IntelliJ. You have your Jetty there. But in the real world, what you want to do is be able to have all this stuff started up automatically. And I've configured your Maven project to do that for you. So when you say Maven verify, recall what Maven verify does. Maven verify, actually I'll do this to a clean verify. So Maven clean, and let's do that first. That goes and deletes all of the artifacts for the project, everything in the target directory. You know what? Well, maybe I'll go do that last. Maven verify builds everything in your project. So it compiles your source code, and it runs your unit tests, and it creates your artifact, which is in this case a thing called a war file, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then it runs your integration tests. Now, in projects 1, 2, and 3, your integration tests were those like project 1 main, IT that just hits the main method. This thing will actually go and run all of your integration tests after it starts up a Tomcat. Sorry, after it starts up a Jetty for you. So it'll actually start the Jetty for you as part of the build process, run your integration tests against that, do all, it'll do all the validation. If anything fails, then the whole build will fail. In this case, it didn't because I didn't test anything. But this then, but I have example integration tests for exercising the phone bill REST client. So this will allow you to have test real HTTP calls to your servlet. And then I also have our old friend Invoke main test case, one of these guys for testing your command line too, if you're a fan of this. Might not be as essential in this project as in other projects, but I want to demonstrate that it was possible. Okay, one last thing. I want to talk about some of the artifacts that are created here. So let's look what's in our target directory. Okay. You guys remember what jar files are? Java archive, and what does that mean?
All your executable stuff goes into the archive.
It's got everything that you need for a library or a command line application. It has to run your command line application. So then it's got your class files, which is compiled source code. If you have anything like localized resource strings, you can have that. If you've got any images that you display, it's got that stuff. It's basically, here are all of the files that you need to run your program. There's also something called a war file. You need a bigger desk.
Yeah.
A war file is a web archive. And that actually, let's take a look at it.
Are there tools for reflector tools that can drop in a jar file into IDE, IntelliJ, just see what's going on?
Oh yeah, you can totally do that. I mean, in decompile. Actually, you guys might have done that. If you've ever clicked on anything and said, oh, I'm decompiling this, accept this license. You might be like, getting somebody mad at you. Yeah, I mean, it decompiles the source code. It knows how to browse through a jar file to see what's there. Yep.
Is it default with the IntelliJ or?
Is there a plugin? I can't remember. I don't think it's default. I think it's there by default. But nice open source projects like the ones that I write have the source code that's easily downloadable, so you don't need to decompile stuff. If you bust open the WAR file, see it's got all sorts of stuff, including classes, which actually this one does have some classes. All of our production code, all of our source code is compiled into classes here. But it's also got some other stuff. It has your index.html, which is there, and it's got like a whole bunch of jar files in there, including things like the servlet API, including things like the code for the abstract phone bill, abstract phone call, all those kinds of things. And then it's got something called the web.xml. And actually, let's take a look at that. So, we start up Jetty, and what we tell Jetty is like, oh, go deploy this WAR file, go deploy this web application into the Jetty. And the way that Jetty knows to route the calls URL, so the /phonebill/calls URL to your servlet, is specified here in this web.xml file. You don't need to change this, but I want you to be aware of it as part of understanding how web archives work and how web applications work in Java. So this basically says, hey, map all the any URL that matches /calls to your phone bill servlet. Because you can have multiple servlets inside your web application. All sorts of different URLs you can serve up. For this one, we'll just have one. That's plenty. And then this phone bill servlet here is then mapped to this class, which is your phone bill servlet class that you write. And the reason that I have this content right after the reflection lecture is that underneath the covers, reflection is used to instantiate your phone bill servlet based on the name of the class here. So go off and learn about reflection. Again, that's where it puts the advanced programming with Java. It's super cool stuff, and what it enables is this contract between something like this web.xml file and your web container. And so then this web application is built by Maven for you, so it knows how to assemble one of these things. And then there's another Maven plugin that knows how to run Jetty and deploy your web application to it. And so it does all of that, and then it runs your integration tests, and everybody talks to each other and has a good time, and your tests are green, and you get a good grade on your project. And that's it. So, to review, and there was a lot tonight. So this was kind of a different kind of thing I did. That we didn't do pair programming tonight. We didn't, talk about those kinds of things. Tonight, I wanted to introduce you to web application programming in Java. So there are a number of parts. Again, there's this web container that runs these web applications that ultimately translate URL requests into Java code implemented in a servlet. And that web application can be driven by a number of clients, including web browsers, but then also a Java command line client. And we saw that the Maven archetype also created one of those for us with a simple dictionary application. And then, really your assignment is to take this skeleton program that was created by the archetype and then modify it to do the things that Project 4 requires, which is all of the manipulation of your phone bill class. So, I hope this is something that's interesting, compelling, and exciting for you. It's also quite challenging. I recommend that you get an early start on it by finishing off your Project 3 and your cones, and then moving on to this. Any questions before we break? Okay. Well, as they come up during the week, please post them on the Google Plus community. And if there isn't anything else, let's go home while it's still light out. Thanks. Have a great week. See you next time.